Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's the first day of the topic of grains. As you already realized, this talk will be held in English because we have an English speaker, Kimberley, which you will learn about more later. But the next few days will be a mix of both languages. I hope it's not a problem for anyone. If so, please just write in the chat and we will try to clear that up. If you have any questions or don't understand anything properly, we will help out for sure. I'm Friederike, I'm running die Gemeinschaft. There's also a colleague of mine here, Isabel, who's also from die Gemeinschaft. You will see us in the next days. So if you have any questions during the time also about the organization or die Gemeinschaft or what we do in general, please feel free to ask. There's also Jonna, maybe you can wave real quick. Jonna organized and curated this whole program with us for the next 4 days. Yes, so you will see a lot from her as well. Yeah, so the next 4 days, as I already said, we will talk all about grains, the whole value chain from the product itself and the agriculture behind it to baking, to milling, to bread, and the end product. And with this group of other people that you see right now, I think we will be 35 in total. We will do deep dive into it. So I'm very excited about this. Today, we kick off with this online talk that we used to really bring also people from outside of Germany in and from outside of Berlin also. We will talk with Kimberley Bell, Lukas Kohl and Miriam Boyer, but Jonna will tell you a little bit more and they themselves, of course. We start now at 5 and it will end at around 7. There will always be a small input from the speakers, and then directly afterwards, we have time for questions and the conversation. So because we're such a small group, really feel free to make this a conversation and more, yeah, of a talk rather than just someone giving input and no interaction. So that would be really great, and I would really encourage you to do so. Yeah, as I said, I want to give the microphone, the imaginary microphone now to Jonna. She is co-curating the grains with us. She's also co-founder of the Korn Labor. And yeah, please continue.
Thanks, Frieda. I'm Jonna, as you mentioned, and I'm really excited for the Korn Symposium to start now, after some months and weeks of preparation. And I'm really excited about the talk we're going to have today, because that's also like the core idea of the Korn Labor. I'm with Bosener Mühle, which is a grains and cereals specialist, all organic, since more than 40 years, and originating from an old, almost 1,000-year-old watermill, so really a traditional milling place. And within this work, I got the idea to explore more, like, what else can you do with grains? What interesting things, like how to achieve a greater diversity. And so the idea of Korn Labor was born, which it's a project, it's not a company or so. It's a project so far. I set it up with former food companions, Olga, Elisabeth. Elisabeth did the Hülsenfrüchte Symposium 10 days ago, two weeks ago, and Olga was there as well, and Steffi and Asya were a great little team, and set out to do the Korn Labor about a year ago. So let's see how big we can make this movement. In Korn, we see all the grains, so all the cereals and the pulses, because they also belong together in the crop rotation, and we think they also belong together on the plates and in a healthy, nutritious, fun diet. But actually in the last 100 or so years, with the industrialization of the agriculture business, you really have to say we lost a lot of diversity in grains, and grains have become such a commodity, an interchangeable mass product that you go to the store to buy flour, but you don't know which variety is it actually. Okay, you know it's wheat most of the time, more than 90% of the time will be wheat, but which variety and from which farm and in which cropping system, like how did this grain, this flour come about, and what can I do with it, and is there an opportunity for it to taste differently with a different flour? Those are questions that I find completely fascinating and we want to explore in Korn Labor. So at Korn Labor, we believe in the inherent value of diversity, and we want to create more diversity along the whole chain and on the fields, and also a diversity of companies, processes along the value chain, the millers, the processors like bakers and chefs, and then of course a greater diversity of grain products and tastes on our plates. And but for this, we believe we need a different kind of grain economy and more cooperation and more exchange between all the actors along the value chain. The farmers, the millers, the bakers, the chefs, and also the consumers. And this we want to facilitate with Korn Labor. We want to provide a platform for such an exchange and also for joint experiments. Because in cooperation, we think that experiments can be not just more fun, but also much more worthwhile, that one knows what the other needs and can integrate that in their work. And also reduce risks, that you do an experiment, you try something new, you take a risk, and by cooperation we believe you can reduce the risk if there is a real partnership. And so this is something that we want to foster with Korn Labor. Let's see what we can make out of it. And I want to talk just briefly about some inspirations that we had in creating Korn, because this is not really something completely new. In Germany, there is not something really comparable, but after reading Dan Barber's The Third Plate, I was so inspired by his search for more flavor and breeding for flavor, that I also checked out the Washington State University Bread Lab by Stephen Jones. He's a renegade breeder. I've heard him be described. He breeds for flavor and for diversity, and he takes heritage grains and sees what you can make of it and how to get wholemeal breads to taste approachable. He has a creation called the approachable loaf, which is supposed to cater to mass taste of like very soft bread, but it's much more healthy because it only has 3 ingredients and it's wholemeal. So that he has a lot of very interesting ideas, and also the name Bread Lab gives an indication. And then I stumbled upon the British podcast Farmerama. 2 years ago, they had a series called Serial, 6 episodes, and that was so fascinating. 6-hour-long podcast that I transcribed all the podcasts for me, because there was so much info in it that I absolutely had to digest it all, and that doesn't work by just hearing it once. We will give you a list of all these inspirational addresses for you to check out later on if you don't already know them. So Farmerama, I can really recommend it. And one of the stars in this podcast was Kimberley Bell, who is a baker from Nottingham and the founder of the UK Grain Lab. So they started such an exchange that I want to see us helping birth in Germany as well. And I'm very excited to hear her story, which she will begin in a minute. And afterwards, we will hear from Lukas Kohl, who's a regenerative farmer from Hessen, and then also from Miriam, co-founder of Kornwerk with their plant-based drinks using mainly old grain varieties. And I'm very interested to hear their stories. And we have a kind of a common thread tonight that will be people who try new things along within the grain value chain and who do this also in cooperation, and their experiences with the value and the role of partnerships in trying new things and wanting to change something in the grain economy. And yes, I'm very excited also for the discussion. We will hopefully have the conversation is the nice word that Frida used. But first off, Kimberley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jona, and thank you everybody for welcoming me in my language, which I really appreciate. It's very generous of you. I'm just going to share my screen, have some slides to talk through. Perhaps someone could give me a thumbs up if they can see. Thank you. It's great to be here and in a small enough group that I really hope we can have a conversation. So I'm going to try to zoom through my presentation to give you a bit of insight into some of my experiences in order that I hope that it will spark some questions from everybody and we can have a more directed conversation towards the end. Jona asked me to begin your symposium by opening up a conversation about what I think is possible if we come together and make the connections that she's just described. And I'll try to do that and draw upon some of my experiences. I was thinking today about how to open that conversation, and I realized there are three kind of steps that I can see now, looking backwards over my journey, that we have taken as a community. And I think they're really important. And perhaps just by highlighting them, it might frame some discussion later. So I think to provoke a movement similar to what Jona was describing, where we're bringing together people to collaborate for an alternative grain economy, then the first thing we have to do is identify a common cause and learn to speak about it. And for me, over the past 8 years of running a bakery here in Nottingham and trying to look at the politics of grains and the systems that go with it, I've arrived at this sort of very loose set of common causes, which I think bring together everybody in the UK Grain Lab network, and also apply to my work within my own bakery, which are to diversify, as Jona says, in crops. That can apply in crops and in terms of different grains that we use, but I think there is a much wider philosophy there as well. To decentralize control of grain economics in order that we can re-empower and facilitate that diversification, and also to democratize it. For me, I think it's important that a lot of people have a say in these food systems in order to diversify them. So that's just kind of maybe a bit of insight. I think the second step is then to bring people together in conference, which is obviously where we are now, in friendship and in solidarity. And the important points I wanted to highlight there is that by bringing people together, that it's powerful when you can create conviviality. And I've always tried to focus on a kind of delicious abundance whenever pulling people together, either around the bakery or around Grain Lab symposiums. And also not to forget about the other parts of our culture, which might get overlooked when we're too focused on the central conversation about grains, and to accept that music and poetry and art need to be part of the conversation. And then the third thing is really to encourage each other once we do come together, encourage each other to have confidence to work for our own communities or work for your communities, and have courage to express your own values in your work. which sounds simple, but it's actually very difficult to do. And I think that means blocking out externally imposed or supposed values that come from elsewhere and just being brave enough to work differently. So in my time being privileged enough to be part of a really progressive network here in the UK of people trying to build a new grain economics, there's one phrase which I hope, it's in English and I hope maybe it will translate or make some sense to you, that keeps coming up and I think is quite powerful. And it came from a young baker who kept saying this at the first symposium that we held. And it's start where you are, use what you have and do what you can. And I think this is just such an empowering message, and it's really important because when you are standing at the beginning, perhaps, and wondering how you can make huge systemic and structural cultural changes is very overwhelming. And I think it's really important to just recognize that what you have and what you are and where you are is enough. And there's much that you can do without trying to make it bigger than it is. So with that, I'm just going to talk a bit about where I started. And this is my bakery that I started 8 years ago. It's called Small Food Bakery. It's in a city called Nottingham, which is in the centre of the United Kingdom. And it's not a particularly large or exceptional city. It's certainly not known for its food culture. And this building where my bakery is located is just on the edge of the city centre. So it's not really on a high street. It's not in a shopping area. It's actually an old school and it's in a partial suburban residential area. So we set up a bakery in an old school kitchen. And this is just some image to show you what it looks like inside. We started with quite a clear mission, and that is printed on the door of the bakery. And I'll come on to where that came from. But essentially, we arrived at a mission to manufacture delicious foods using ingredients directly traded and traceable back to healthy soil and good people. And that obviously includes bread, but we are quite a diverse kitchen and we make quite a lot of different things. So for us, it's about farming first and obviously embodying the principle of diversity. So we don't just stick to bread and pastries. We will make products for our customers with whatever the farmers grow, and that's important. When I started the bakery 8 years ago, my motivation was actually really similar to Yona in that I read Dan Barber's The Third Plate, and I thought, wow, it really blew my mind. And I started reading other books that were connected to it and learning about the Grain Lab. And I started to really become very aware that the big corporate global food system was problematic in many, many different directions, too many to mention here. And so I began my bakery and I called it Small Food because I wanted it to be the opposite of big food. I thought, if I don't like the big food system, could I start a bakery and start to explore what the opposite might be? And that's why I called my bakery Small Food Bakery. And this slide is something that I present frequently to people who are perhaps skeptical about the fact that the big food system is problematic. And this is relevant to the UK, but I expect you will have an equivalent in Germany. It would be really interesting to see. So this, in the UK, almost all of our food retail is done by supermarkets. There are 7 predominant brands who control about 95% of the retail market in the UK. And actually what I find really shocking is that 4 supermarket brands alone control 70% of the retail food shopping of the British public. And I thought it'd be really interesting to examine what kind of cuisine that industry or those economics were actually providing for the British people. What kind of culture was that generating in terms of our food? And this is an interesting list because it's the top 10 highest earning or highest grossing products that are sold within that supermarket system. This is from 2014. I haven't found anything more recently published, but I suspect it hasn't changed very much. And what you can see is that the products that are listed, and you may not be familiar with some of these brands, so I'll run through. The top one is a vodka. And these numbers are in millions of pounds. per year. Then we have some crisps, some potato chips, another vodka, another potato chips. Then we have Coca-Cola. And then as a baker, this got really interesting for me because the next one down was a brand of bread, which I guess globally might be referred to as Wonder Bread. It's a white standard loaf that's very fluffy and it's wrapped in a plastic bag. And probably find one in every household in the UK. And the list goes on. There are other couple of loaves down there that are pretty much the same product. And I kind of like to show this slide to explain to people who perhaps still hold some belief that the supermarket system in the UK of food retail offers any kind of choice or healthy diet or sensible economic kind of structures for people to make their household decisions on, and I actually just feel like it's failing so badly that we must look for an alternative system. And this was the motivation for me starting Small Food Bakery 8 years ago. For me, I'm a cook. I've always been a cook and I love eating and I love cooking for people. I love sharing food. And there's a sort of more poetic reason why I call the bakery Small Food. And that's really linked to childhood memory of experiencing eating foods that were grown by my grandparents in the garden. And I still hold those memories. And I was very aware that all the flavor that came from those sort of homegrown products was missing from the big food system as well. I'd reached a point personally where I wasn't enjoying the food that was coming from this big system. I was still looking for something more delicious. So Small Food for me is also about recognizing that there's such beauty in smaller scale, more natural systems. And when you taste a tomato from the vine, warmed by the sun, in the place that it's grown, I think it would be hard for anyone to disagree. As a cook and as someone who's really interested in flavor, I was also fascinated by the fact that if you tasted the same variety of tomato grown in the same greenhouse, but perhaps from the other side of the greenhouse, that might also taste different. And I feel like that's the beauty in food, is that we really, if we can tune in all of our senses, we can use it as a way to explore and understand our environment and our connection to the natural world. And I wanted my bakery to be able to give other people that experience of tasting something so specific, so of a time and a place, that perhaps it would help them to reconnect to things that I felt were really important in a much, much bigger political sphere. So for me, the diversify, decentralize, and democratize were like the kind of key values of starting Small Food. And those things are also common to my ambitions for the UK Grain Lab and the reason that I started that, which I'll come on to in a moment. So I'm a big advocate for small scale because of some of the reasons I've described, but I think it's really worth pointing out the importance of the benefits of working small. And I do this because I'm often accused of not having enough impact or not being big enough to have an impact. And I think that's really disempowering. And just going back to the phrase, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. It is really important to believe that you as individuals stepping out on this journey can actually make quite a big difference with your action. And small scale can be really useful in instigating quite large structural changes. And the reasons are that everyone gets a seat at the table, including your customers. So it can be quite a powerful way to make changes. We find working in a bakery where we have direct contact with our customers, we're able to explain to them our decision making and why we do things the way we do, and we can bring them along on the journey. We're able to adapt our product and product ranges really quickly to changes in environmental conditions and the products that come from the farms. And that's really important in building a diverse local food way. We don't have any large machinery lock-ins, so our intentions are never kind of polluted by the need to repay loans. We can really follow our hearts in the way that we run our food production. And we really rely on hands and people and building skills within our network so that we can be as adaptable to those changes and support the farmers we work with to the best of our abilities. It's a non-technical approach. And that's where we feel the investment needs to be made. In return, we get meaningful work for everyone that's working in the bakery feels very empowered and very important, and they feel like their work is very valued by the community. So yeah, just I'm going to move on. I just wanted to, language is important, and I realize it's difficult when you generously allow me to speak in my own language, but I think it's really important just to mention that one of the key beliefs we hold, or I hold at Small Food, is that foodways are about networks and not food chains. And what I've learned over the last few years is that we have to look at energy as a system in farming and in food and in people, and energy must never really flow just in one direction. So I like to talk about networks rather than chains. And I think it's really important in creating a decentralized and democratized system, to acknowledge the importance of reciprocity. So the idea that you give, but you also receive, and things go two ways. And it's not just about all the energy passing from the farm out into the community and then going to consumers. It should be a circle where everybody is involved, and everybody's involved in the decision making. And I've just put this image up to show you kind of the spread since UK Grain Lab of the regional grain groups that we have here in the UK, and just to show kind of how things are moving, really. But I just thought it was quite a nice map. I think it's really important to remember that that this movement, this alternative grain economy, is really about people. It's a social movement, and although we can talk about bread and we can really get geeky about grains, and we all love our baking and our cooking activities, and really enjoy being in our kitchens and really enjoy eating, but actually, like, what I've learned is it's really about people, and my journey has been informed by some really critical relationships that I've had with some key people along the way. So I thought I'd just tell you a couple of stories about some people that have been important to me. And hopefully that will illustrate to you a little bit about some of the work that I've done, and then we'll open up for questions. So one of the most important people in my journey learning about grain and learning about being a better baker over the last 8 years was this man. His name's Professor Martin Wolf. And I met him when he was 79 years old. And he was farming in Suffolk at his beautiful little farm called Wakelands Agroforestry. And Martin was a very esteemed academic. I was actually a bit scared to go and meet him when I went to meet him originally, because he'd had a career in plant breeding, and he'd worked at universities all over the world. And it was in his retirement that he set up Wakelands Agroforestry, which was a farm like no other I've ever seen. I'll just show you a picture of it from the sky. So you can see this image of British farming, great British farming at its best. There's all these fields, and they're all monocultures. So there's just one crop in each of those very large fields. And if you're lucky, they're bordered by a bit of hedge and some wildlife. But here in the middle of all of this monoculture, you can see Wakelands Agroforestry. The principle behind Martin's farm was to try to diversify the cropping as much as possible. And so he grew arable crops such as wheat and barley and lentils and all kinds of other experimental things and vegetables in alleys of trees that were 12 meters wide. And at some point in my baking journey, I became uncomfortable with understanding that my main ingredient, which was wheat, came from a monocultural farming system. And I wondered whether we could make bread with other things, but I'm a baker and I love gluten and I love making bread with wheat, and I didn't want to give it up. But I heard that Martin had developed a wheat on his agroforestry farm, and I thought, well, maybe if the wheat is being grown in an agroforestry system, I might be able to commit myself to use that and not to see it as a bad thing. So I went to Martin initially because I wanted to learn about his agroforestry, and I thought maybe that's just a good way of farming wheat. But when I arrived, I got much more of an education about wheat than I expected. because I learned that for the past 20 years, he'd been developing a new kind of wheat, which he referred to as a population. We call it the YQ Wakelands population, and some of you may have heard of it. And as a plant breeding scientist, Martin had come to a conclusion after his long academic career that we needed more diversity at every level of farming, but his specialism was in plant breeding and in barley and wheat breeding. So he had an ambition to try to create a wheat population that had as much genetic diversity in it as possible. And as a baker arriving at Martin's farm wanting to learn a little bit about alternative farming systems, my mind was completely blown to realize that some of the philosophy behind the ideas of diversity and moving away from monoculture that I was exploring in the bakery, he'd been exploring right down to the actual DNA of the seed itself. And this was a critical moment for me in my understanding, because I realized that these philosophies, these core values that we are arriving at collectively, actually apply to every single element in the network. They apply to every kind of process, right back to the plant breeding. So Martin taught me a great deal. So this crazy diagram on the left-hand side of my slide is actually just a diagram to show how he began creating the YQ Wakelands population wheat. These are all varieties of wheat down the left and the right. And he first of all crossbred each one of those every which way that it could be crossbred. And then he created a new set of wheat plants, 190 new wheat plants, which became the basis for his population. After that, he started to grow those 190 plants up at Wakelands Agroforestry, and he grew them in the tree alleys for 17 years. It was field trial year 17 when I met Martin, with no human selection. So there will have been some crossing of the wheats during that time. But the idea was that he wanted to create a wheat population that had such a diverse bank of genetics that it would respond consistently to any changes in climate pressure on the farm, to any changes in the pressures from plant pathogens and other diseases that might occur on any given year. And what he was really interested in doing was creating a wheat for organic farmers that would consistently deliver the same yield each year, no matter what happened. And I can now report retrospectively, after working with this wheat and the UK Grain Lab network, that I have no evidence to suggest that it doesn't work. And we've just had a terrible year here with harvest in the UK and a lot of failures, particularly in heritage varieties. And all of the farms that I've been to have had success with this population. So a fantastic piece of work by Martin. But what Martin taught me was we became really good friends, Martin and I, and he was a really important part of my learning to articulate what my values were and how I might apply them in the bakery. But I think this quote really encompasses what he taught me, although it's not his quote, it's from another scholar in the UK academic called Colin Tudge. But I think it's really important that, as well as the science, particularly in plant breeding, you need to teach the philosophy of the science. And that's a really important part, I think, of founding any movement such as this. So I was so inspired by Martin's work, particularly when he told me that no baker was interested in his YQ population and that no one had really wanted to bake with it commercially. And I was so astonished when I met him about the kind of philosophy behind what he was trying to do and the resilience he was trying to create for organic farmers. I said, well, I'll bake with it. And we at Small Food have really founded a bakery based on this wheat. It's our wheat. We love it. All the bakers at the bakery feel a strong connection to it. And it feels very much like it was a gift from Martin, that he could give us this wheat to challenge us as bakers. And I think it's really important to say that we see our role at Small Food as bakers as being a buffer. I don't know if there's a translation to German, Jona, that you can help me with, but basically it's our job to make sure that whatever comes from the harvest is turned into meaningful food for our community. And I think it's important to say this because we come from a culture of artisan bakery, which is reasonably egotistical and particularly perpetuated by social media and Instagram and the need to have beautiful looking products. I think we often put the kind of end aesthetic first, rather than starting with the farming and thinking about sort of more deeper values, like whether or not farming has been done in a way that is good for our environment. And the YQ, weight class population wheat, has become a symbol of that for us at the bakery and in our wider community, because it challenged us to learn to bake with it. And it does not bake, or it does not work in the same way as commodity sort of blended wheat from big mills. It has its own personality, and we really had to learn to get to grips with that. So this picture here is one of the bakers from Small Food Laura demonstrating at UK Grain Lab in 2018. And it was really the YQ wheat and Martin's work that inspired me to hold the gathering, because I just felt, having learnt this and been so inspired, I wanted to share that information with as many people as possible and see whether we could start a movement. So that was my relationship with Martin. Another relationship I just want to talk about quickly is with these two chaps. On the left here is John Turner, he's a farmer, and on the right is Paul Wyman, and he's a traditional miller, and that's his windmill there. And I was really fortunate enough to meet them. And because I was so interested in the YQ, weight class population, and I wanted to perpetuate that story, I went off on a hunt to try and find a farmer who might grow it for me locally, because we used all of the crop at Wakelands Agroforestry, and Martin suggested that we should really have our own crop and test it out in our own locality. And I was lucky to meet John and Paul, who, having worked together for several years, already had a good relationship moving grain locally from the farm to the mill. And so it wasn't too much of a leap of faith for them to say, okay, let's grow a really unusual variety and try it out in the local market. So I've been working with them now for 4 years, and I'm really proud that we managed to plant a crop of YQ and create a very, very local grain network. That's a map just showing the proximity of my bakery to the farm down in the bottom corner and the mill, and it's all within 50 miles. So everything's very, very local. And the benefit of this is really to have reciprocity and feedback loops, because we're able to spend time together and have a very, very sort of short distance between each other. We have a relationship, you know, we're sort of friends as well. We share meals together, we get together, we spend time at each other's bakery, farm, mill. There's a lot of trust there, and there's a lot of feedback that goes on. So over the last 4 years, we've managed to go from a situation where we did an experiment to grow the YQ, weight class population locally, to see whether or not we could get it to work. Working with the mill and sort of feedback from the bakery, we were able to adapt the milling processes to get the best kind of flour that we could. And working the bakery, we were able to adapt our formulas and ways of working to make sure that we could use the crop. And then Farmer John, he developed some confidence in this. So one of the most exciting things that's happened really is that in the last year, we were able to work with 4 really unusual wheat crops that John had grown for us and that were milled at this windmill. And they were all genetically diverse crops, challenging the idea of monocropping and single variety wheats, which has become really important for me in the philosophy of what I do. Here's some photographs of some of the bakers from Small Food standing in the field of wheat with John, the farmer, just the first year that we managed to harvest it. And I just wanted to show you this really to say that it was probably one of the most emotional days of my life standing in that field, and it was very important for all of the bakers as well. And we stood there and talked for hours, and we literally just could not move from the spot, because it's an incredibly powerful thing to stand in a crop that you know you're going to bake with for the next year and that you're connected to, and that you had a say in deciding what that seed was going to be. It's just so grounding, and it really makes you feel in community, and it makes you feel connected to the place that you are. So this was a photograph of all of the different population wheats that were harvested this year when they came in for test baking. Was just a fantastic moment to have those things, and it's been a long journey over the 4 or 5 years to get to this point. So now in the bakery, we're in this phenomenal position where, having started out just questioning everything, we're now making a whole range of products, all kinds of different sourdough breads and pastries like croissants and morning buns and brioche products. And every single bit of wheat that we use is from within that 50-mile triangle that I showed you on the map. And it's been, I'm really proud of it, because when I started, people told me it couldn't be done, and we've done it. And yeah, it was just a wonderful moment. And so this is a picture of some of the bread that we bake with the YQ Wakelands population. And I just wanted to sort of say really that there's a lot of power in a loaf of bread. And there's not enough time for me to go into all of the nuance of the network and everything that we've managed to achieve. But hopefully we can discuss that now. But I just hope that I've managed to convey how important it has been for me working locally and working with a wheat crop that I have a connection to the seed, and it's got something meaningful to me and to the bakers that work at Small Food. This is a banner that hangs in our bakery that we all sewed together to march at Paramadre a few years ago, just expressing our values in the bakery for all to see. And I'll just finish with this quote, which I think is lovely. And it really is a reminder of why we do the work we do and why it's important. As we make bread, we make ourselves. So it's just really about staying connected to the values that you hold and making sure that your work truly represents those values. And it's a really good place to be in, it's a good space to end up as a baker or a farmer or wherever you sit in the food network. It's a place that you can be happy.
Wow, thank you very much, Kim. That was an amazing overview over so many fascinating issues, and I guess we could talk all night about just everything that you spoke about. Let's take, like, I don't know, 15 minutes or so to stick with your presentation and to see which kinds of comments and questions have come up from the room. Are there already any? Just switch on or Frida, how do you want to handle it? Should we raise the hand? Yeah, raise the hands, and then we will call you. Katrin, was that a raised hand? No. Okay. I can also jump in with the first question. You also mentioned that you're also a cook or a chef, and not just a baker, and you also want to incorporate a lot of the other crops from the rotation of your farms. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, how do you do it? How do you incorporate the crop rotation into what you're doing at the farm, in the bakery?
I think because it's kind of, I suppose it's a philosophy in terms of how we work. So we're a very unusual business. We only open to the public. Well, pre-COVID, we were open 3 days a week, and we spend the rest of the time making products from scratch. So I really focus a lot of time and energy with the team, which we're 6 people now at Small Food, in teaching them core skills in terms of preserving, baking, cooking, and other kind of food transformations like fermentation of vegetables and things. And because we only trade directly with our customers, we don't wholesale. We focus almost entirely on the performance that is opening the shop at the end of the week. And we started off baking, but actually we quickly realized that the sorts of customers we're attracting were interested in the philosophy behind what we were doing, and they were very interested in the fact that we were working with local farms and that we were working with agroecological farms who were pushing the envelope of what is seen as possible in farming to try to work for, you know, a more environmentally secure future. And it just made no sense at that point just to stick to bread or baked goods, and there were vegetables coming from the same farm, for example. So applying the principle of diversity, we sell quite a lot of produce in our shop that is fresh and comes straight from the farm. So we have a green grocery section selling vegetables and fruits. And we also sell all of the other ingredients that we use in the bakery. So we obviously use in the bakery dairy and eggs and cheeses and butters and things like that. And we quickly realized that our customers wanted to be able to buy those products for their homes as well. So we sell by retail all of the same ingredients that we use. And as we've set ourselves the mission to investigate or to make sure that all of the ingredients we use are traceable back to people we know working to improve the health of the land, we just felt that all of those ingredients were so special that they needed to be made available. But I'll give you a couple of examples. So with the vegetables, if they don't sell on the retail counter at the end of the week, then it's one person's job to come in the following week at the beginning and to imagine what all of those vegetables need to become in our bakery production for the following week. So we make pizza and we make pies, and they need to have vegetables on the top. We make very unusual pizzas. You won't very rarely find a tomato and cheese pizza at Small Food Bakery. We will put any vegetable on a pizza. And if we can't use them in the bakery goods, we will look at ways of preserving them, either pickling them in vinegar or using like sauerkraut fermentation techniques to give them a longer life, and we'll make them available to the customers in that way. Yeah, sometimes we have like a lot of eggs left over, for example. We have to think of things to do. So we have an ice cream churn in the bakery, and if we have to use the eggs, we make ice cream. We also have a pasta extruder, really small one. So at the moment, we're actually closed for a summer holiday, but I can't say to the farmer, I won't buy your eggs for 2 weeks, because what is he going to do with them for 2 weeks? You know, I commit to the eggs all year round. So he keeps delivering the eggs. And the first thing we're going to have to do when we get back is make a lot of egg linguine, which obviously once it's dried will be preserved and stored, and we can sell that right up to Christmas. So that's how we deal with being a buffer, you know, between the farms, being the produce, and the customers, is just try to be imaginative and use our own sort of geeky fascination with small scale equipment, like semi-industrial equipment, because that's, you know, part of the joy of being in a bakery is just we love all this kit, and having a pasta extruder is fun. So it ticks a lot of boxes.
I saw it on Instagram. It's just mesmerizing to watch the pasta swirling out of the out of this extruder. Well, yeah, I love that approach. Thank you. We have some questions in the chat, and first up was Margot. Do you want to switch on your microphone and post your question directly, or should I read it?
Sure. Yeah. No, so it was because you said that some presentation. You said at the end of your presentation that a lot of people were saying you can't do that, it's not possible. And I was wondering, why were those people saying that it was not possible? So what were those entry barriers to do it? And like apparently you can do it if you did it, but was it more a question of knowledge, of time, or I don't know, network resources? Why do you think people are not doing it?
Good question. There's maybe two important elements to my answer. One of them is just simply in bakery, we haven't done a lot of plant breeding in the UK for wheats for bakery for many years, because we prefer to import them because it's cheaper. There's obviously a huge economic and political history behind that. But I think we've unfortunately arrived at a situation where it's common belief amongst bakers that it is not possible to make a good sourdough with UK grown organic wheat. That extends to being told it's not possible to make a croissant with UK grown organic wheat. You know, that there's a common belief that we need very strong, high protein wheats to be able to make successful breads and pastries. And that was one of the things I was told a lot in the beginning, is that you have to buy from the millers these like blended, very, very strong flours to achieve the products that you want. And so that was one of the things we've really turned on its head. So in, forgive me if you're a baker, I will explain just in case.
Not, I'm not.
In bakery, it's quite common to look for sort of laminated doughs for croissant or pain au chocolat. Flours with around 14% is what's sold to most bakers in the UK, 14% protein. So that's a very high gluten content. And in sourdough bread baking, most bakers are looking for something between 12 and 12.5%. And some of these crops that I was looking at, so the Wakelands Waikiki population, the first crop that we baked with was only 8.9% protein. And I was told that that was not possible for using in bakery, and that it should be discarded for animal feed because it wasn't milling quality. And that's one of the things that, you know, that they constantly come up with, is you can't do that, you can't make that with that product. And I think that really applies to all products. You know, you can't make pasta with soft wheats from the UK. I'm always told you have to have the you know, the traditional wheats from Italy, for example, to make good pasta. And of course, I can't make Italian pasta with British wheats, but I can make something that's really good. And with an open mind, I can still make something that's useful for my community, and that's a bit more specific to where I am and who we are. But then on the second part of my answer to your question is that the same applies in agriculture. I mean, people really love to tell you can't do things. It just seems to be the default response. And I think it's very hard to keep your spirits up and just keep saying, no, actually, I'm going to try anyway. Thank you very much. But in agriculture, I was told that it was not possible to localize wheat or the economics of grains, because the economics of it, I was told, only works at large scale. And I learned in the early days of talking to farmers and talking to regional grain groups that it was accepted practice to send wheat off a farm in a 28-ton lorry, and that anything smaller than that was not deemed economically viable. So at Grain Lab, the first meeting, we came up with this term, which was called haulier economics. So I decided to try to convince everyone we need to move away from haulier economics. We should not be letting the truck manufacturers decide for us what wheat gets put into our bread. That's crazy. And I wanted to challenge that and to try to prove that we can do it at small scale locally. And of course, the economics are completely different. So the farmers sending their wheat off farms in 28-ton trucks are perhaps getting paid, you know, £200 a ton. I guess, I don't know, let's just say 300 euros a ton. And I'm paying the farmer that I work with double that, so maybe 600 euros a ton. And the problem is everyone assumes that that makes it not possible, but there are so many reasons in the value chain, in the complexity of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, that mean that it's completely incomparable. You cannot say that I'm paying too much money for the wheat when the value that I'm getting from it, from being part of this amazing network of people in a community that makes me feel connected and valued. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I was just told that it was never going to be possible for a small bakery to receive wheat directly from one farm and to know where it had come from. And that's another thing that we've proven, and many people around the UK now have proven to be not true. But there are a lot of people trying to protect their interests out there, you know. They like to tell you can't do things. You can if you want to.
Yeah, it's kind of this monoculture of the minds. let's say, how I call them. Yeah.
Thank you. We have 3 more raised hands or questions in the chat. I would like to do these and maybe briefly, and then we'll move over to the next speaker and hear what Lucas has to tell us. Next up was Christian with a short question. Do you want to pose it yourself?
Well, it was more or less answered already. I was wondering if in the grain lab, like you said, others picked it up, and I was wondering if that particular grain is now used by other bakers or grown also in other parts of the UK.
Yes, it is. It's quite commonly found now. And part of the reason for its popularity was that the YQ population was developed as a diverse grain bred from modern wheat. So they tend to be shorter straw varieties. A lot of people saw that as a problem, but actually it's been very beneficial for farmers who are transitioning away from chemical farming systems into organic, because they've struggled with the heritage varieties that are tall straw and found them problematic in that they fall at the end of the season. So actually it's been popular with farmers, and I think the bakers are now starting to come around to the idea and realizing that it's working. And the Grain Lab certainly had a big part to play in making that acceptable and accessible. I think what's most exciting about the impact that the YQ Wakelands population has had being talked about at Grain Lab back in 2018 until now is that it's made everyone want their own population wheat. And I'm really happy that that is the outcome, because I think, you know, in advocating for the YQ population to be used in bakery and demonstrating how it can be done, it was absolutely not my intention for other people to just copy what we did. What I hope they would feel is that they could find their own way, and that was really important, because I don't feel like I'm going to be right about everything, and it's not about everybody just copying one person who made a brave decision to do something differently. I think what's wonderful to see now in the UK is that people have opinions on what they want to grow, and bakers are working with farmers to discuss that. And they're all starting, well, there's many people now starting to have that wonderful experience that we had standing in that field, where you really feel like you belong somewhere, and you feel like something's being grown for you and for your craft and for your skill, and that you can take part in something a bit more meaningful. So hopefully it's the idea of population that's perpetuated rather than that single crop.
Great. So it started a parallel universe kind of starting to grow. Thanks.
Great. Then next up is Frederick with his question.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberley, for your inspirational talk. My question is about your, let's say, journey of your recipe development of your, let's say, approachable loaf. Like, how long did it took you to develop something where you can like communicate between the field and your own grain and your customer? Like, how long did it took you to develop something which is wanted by the customer, which is remembered, or like how, like I once visited a colleague of you from the Grain Lab, like Hexby Bakehouse, and I saw his Yorkshire 85, which works, like sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, which is a very complicated bread he designed for a special Yorkshire flour he got from Yorkshire Mills. And so I'm curious about your experience, and about maybe also the challenge it took having a special wheat and developing something special or something of its own.
Yeah, I think it took about a year from first coming into contact with the wheat, of just making a small amount every week, to getting to the point where I was confident to demonstrate it in front of people as accomplished as Phil at Hexby Bakehouse, who came to Grain Lab. And it was very nerve-wracking, you know, to stand in front of those sorts of people and to demonstrate a bread. But But at the same time, I feel like I'm still learning about it. And I think the reason I love it is because I'm always learning, working with it. But the thing that I had to learn quite quickly was that it was to ignore all the rules that I'd been taught about bread making and actually just follow my own instincts and intuitions. And I did a lot of trial and error, took all the variables from a bread system and just examined changing one thing each time. It was quite painful. And I learned a few things about the bread, about the wheat, which enabled me to make better bread products. And I think every year we're actually learning to do more and more. So I'm making now sourdough viennoiserie with the YQ wheat. And if you'd asked me in 2017 whether that was possible, even I would have said, sorry, that's not possible. But because I'm changing the way I work as a baker or the way I understand the parameters of what's possible, I feel like it's teaching me really. And I hope that will never end because it's super interesting. But there were a few, I think it's really important to not focus entirely on the product, but to look at all of the softer elements of product development and customer interaction as being important as well. So we did a few engagement exercises with customers and also with other bakers to try to bring the idea of this bread and the idea of population wheat into their imaginations and to make them accept it. And I think the story is almost as important as it being a delicious and interesting thing to eat. We used the sensory scientist from the university here to run some sessions actually guiding people through bread tasting. And that was really interesting because people assume they like certain things, but actually when you go through a process of tasting led by someone who really knows what they're doing and can encourage people to express themselves, we found that a lot of people like this bread better than the other breads. And that gave the bakers a lot of confidence as well, because it made us realize maybe we weren't just trying to sell something that people didn't want. Maybe they just didn't realize they wanted it yet. And that has been a big part of the process as well, as just taking people along for the ride. This year, we managed to do something that I've always wanted to do, which was really special, which was we took 70 of our regular customers to walk through the wheats just before they were harvested about a month ago. And I think they all came along willingly, knowing that we would make them a nice lunch. Whatever happened, it would be quite a nice day out. But they didn't realize why they were going, and they all had such a profound experience learning about the wheats and walking through them and seeing their bread ahead for the year. And it's all of those sort of softer side things were part of the product development as well, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't just about, testing the metrics and the parameters within the bakery. There were a few practical things I realized, like I had to oversize the loaf in the beginning to get it to attract attention on the counter because it was a wholemeal sourdough and needed to make it a little bit bigger. We did some very dramatic kind of scoring and, kind of dramatic sort of flour dusting and contrast and things, a bit like Phil does with his Yorkshire 85 with the seam. Just that to attract attention, but we tried everything. We did it because we believed in it, and it worked in the end. So now it makes up 30% of our production, the wholemeal sourdough that we make with that wheat. So I feel like we got there in the end, but it's part of who we are now.
We're a bit behind schedule, but I think we can make the last hand the question by Katrin and Ronja, and then we'll move on.
Hello, thanks for your presentation. It was really inspirational. I really enjoyed it. You were talking a lot about the importance of community and the connection between farmers, millers, and bakers. And obviously you already do so much to also include the customer in this network and to kind of, you were just talking about taking them, to the field and talking about the wheat that goes into their bread. I was just wondering how you, or what is your opinion on community-supported bakeries, which is pretty much just taking this concept of community-supported agriculture, which is mostly focused on vegetables and not on processed products like bread. Yeah, how you feel about that, if you have any experience in that field, and whether you believe that this could be another way to kind of connect the customer even more to the bread and to the food that they're eating.
Yeah, there's been a couple of examples of really great bakeries that's opened here in the UK, not entirely adopting community-supported bakery model, but using a bread subscription as the foundation for developing a customer base. And I think it's possible to have quite meaningful relationships with your customers who subscribe in that way. From my point of view, being in an urban environment, both of the bakeries that I'm thinking of are very rural. They're based on farms, and I think they need to have that slightly structured relationship with their customers in order to guarantee that they can bake enough to make their bakery work. And I think if you can combine that model with what we call participatory plant breeding, so the idea that the customers can also come on a journey of deciding what gets grown and why, and bringing them into the conversation with the farmer as well. I think it could be very profound for a community to have a bakery established in that way. I guess it occurs to me that it's also really one of the negative parts of having a solely community-supported bakery that runs like the vegetable ones, is that you actually run the risk of leaving people out and creating a club around the bakery. And so I think it would be really nice to look at running two parallel models and having the backbone of a business as community supported, but also thinking about how you can allow access points to people who are not completely signed up for the idea yet, but might be your customers in the future. Because my experience being in Nottingham in a very unusual location is that I feel like there's been a lot of people who've come to us nervously for the first time and probably wouldn't have committed in that way. But because we've been kind and generous with them and given them tasters and taken time to talk to them and allowed them just the space and time to come into our little crazy world, they've become part of the community. And I think that's worth considering as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kimberly, so much. Maybe we come back with more questions for you in the last bit of the discussion. For now, thank you so much. It was really a lot of information and inspiration for all of us, I think. Thank you. Now, let's move to Germany, to Hessen. Lukas, you're a farmer. We've already spoken to you in our first Korn Labor sessions, but please introduce yourself and also talk something about the issues you're working on right now, challenges, and something around cooperation.
Yes, thank you. I'm just gonna start my few slides. Yeah, it's just a short input from my side. I hope that's fine for you. Well, when you look at the value chain, or how we learned the network from Kimberley, I'm at the very left side, I would say. I'm a farmer, and not only a farmer, I'm also a soil scientist. And I think the combination of this is pretty important, because everyone also always thinks it starts with the farming. I think it starts in the soil, because our food, our grain is coming from the nutrients and the microbes and soil that keeps the soil healthy and keeps the grain also healthy. So, well, that's why I am having 3 projects, when you would call it like this. The the first project is Boden Balance. That's something where I'm looking at soils from different farmers and analyzing them on their nutrient content and making recommendations to balance those nutrients in the soil in the right way, because there are many influences between nutrients, and when you put them in the right balance, you have a better soil chemistry, of course, and with a better soil chemistry, you have better soil physics. With better soil physics, you have better habitat for the soil biology, and when the soil biology, when your microbes in the soil are happy, you will have healthy plants, and healthy plants means healthy people. So that's why I'm doing that. The next project is humidation. That's my doctoral studies I'm doing at the University of Gießen. It is a project here in Hessen with where 5 different farmers are taking part of, and this on-station research, which you can see on the picture, is at my farm. What we are trying to do is form humus, so really fertile substance in soil, which is really carbon rich, if you don't know it. And yeah, we want to form that in a very short time period, and this we're trying to do with different cover crops, with nurse crops, with intercropping, and also with min tillage, so minimum tillage, so less tillage, and also with biochar. We compare that with a common conventional system that is practiced here in Hessen. Well, and the third project, if I would want to call it like that, it's my farm, or the farm of my parents. So I'm also a farmer. Together with my father, we have dairy cows. That's the picture from spring. It's not from now. Yeah, we have dairy cows, but we also have agriculture fields, and we grow many different crops, and that's well, the most of them. The most important for today are the grains. So we have spelt and rye and oat, which we sell to our local bakery, which is right in our village. Though that's that's pretty good for us. They get our spelt rye and oat, and we have we have another thing where we work together. That's carbon credits. So we try to form humus in our soil. So we store carbon in our soil, and we get carbon credits. So we get paid as much carbon we save in the soil. So when we have carbon dioxide saved as humus in our soil, we get paid. And the Weidehof Hochland, so the bakery, has emissions from the bakery that they want to somehow to be neutralized. So they want to have less emissions, but they can't because they have the bakery running. And a way how to handle this is that they pay us for forming humus in soil, and that makes our soil more healthy, more fertile, and they save their spelt, their rye, their oats for the future. Well, the other crops we are growing, we also have legumes like lupines, fava beans, sunflower seeds, and linseeds, which are going to a local oil mill. We also have potatoes, vegetables, mainly cabbage, which we also sell local. So we only grow things that we can sell local. And we also have alfalfa grass for our dairy cows in our crop rotation. And well, oh, okay, that's how our vegetable growing looks like. We have a innovative system where we plant our vegetables in this thick layer of mulch. Well, but that's just something out there, which is not the big topic of today. We have some special topics concerning grains on our farm. We are working on one is perennial wheat. We have special breeding where we grow wheat, or where we sow wheat. Where we are sowing wheat on our fields, and we harvest it for 3 years or more. We just started with it, and yeah, it looks not that bad. The yields, of course, are not that high, but the interesting thing could be that we have that the plants grow for a longer term of time, and with that they can have deeper rooting and are more adapted to the climate change, because deeper rooting means that they can even have water when it's really dry. Yeah, and maybe you know this from the US, where they have the perennial wheat called Kernza, or the perennial grain. I don't know if it's wheat actually, but it's also perennial. And when this guy is comparing the roots of the Kernza on the left side with the one from wheat on the right side, and as you can see, it's a huge difference. And that's something we are trying to do as well. We don't have this variety of Kernza. Maybe we can manage with a Korn Labor to get some seeds from the US at some time. But this is really something we should look at in future, to have perennial grains also growing on our fields. The next thing we are always looking at are mixed crops. And a really nice example I can show you here from this year. It's fava beans, and it's mixed with not only other common crops, but also with many flowers and herbs, and but also oat. You maybe you can't see that because the fava beans are too big. But below the fava beans, there are many different flowers and many different herbs, like I think 15 different species. And with that, we have a really diverse field, and which attracts many different insects, and that's good for the soil. That's good for the plant health as well. And we actually harvested already some plots of this, and we have higher yields with the mixed crops system, and we don't have to do any weeding, so it's really something we also should look at in future more and more. Well, at least I want to show you some issues we want to solve. So at first, on the agriculture fields, on our agriculture fields, but also on the most agriculture fields of Germany, we have no trees. But it could be a nice option to have more diversity in the field, and also have more deeper rooting plants on our agriculture fields, which is really important for humus formation and really important in terms of climate change. And that's why we want to start soon with planting trees on our fields. We didn't yet, but we are going to, and the big question is what we are going to plant, how we are going to sell the products from the field. So not only the products from the trees, but also the products in between those tree lines. So maybe the spelt or the wheat or the ray from in between, and we probably would need a better price for those, because it's a pretty time-consuming system where we don't get more money out of it in the first years, because we don't have in the first years products from the trees. And maybe, well, I think about maybe developing a brand where you know, okay, this wheat is coming from an agroforestry system or something like that. I don't know. Well, the other issues are the processing of the grain. As a small farmer, you where you want to grow diverse crops, and where you have like those mixed crops, it's not easy to sell them because no one wants to have mixed seeds. So you have to separate them, which needs machinery, which is really expensive. So that's an issue we are working on. We also have some machines to separate them, but not all of them. We probably would need. Another thing is a hulling machine for spelt. We are still building right now, which also is not that easy to do as a small farmer, because you don't have this much amounts of grain to really to really have such a big machine, which is so expensive. And probably the biggest problem from the processing is a local grain mill. As I showed you on the first slide or on the second slide, we have this cooperation with our local bakery, but well, there is a grain mill which is not in our village. It's like 150 kilometers away from us, so it goes to the far away grain mill, our spelt and rye and oat, and it comes back to our village to the bakery because there's no other organic grain mill closer to us. And yeah, that's pretty sad for us. And it should be like that there is, when they're at the bakery, there also should be a grain mill nearby. That would be the best case, but at the moment, and I think even in whole Germany, it's going more and more the other way around, that there are less and less grain mills, and only a few big grain mills, which is working against this local network we are looking at. Well, that's already everything I wanted to say here. I'm happy to answer questions or have a discussion with you.
Thanks, Lucas. That was great and very concise, and also tipped on a lot of different interesting issues. Maybe you can end the presentation and we can see everybody again. Are there any questions? Raise your hands. The issue of the mills is, of course, that was also one whole episode in the Farmerama podcast. The millers are missing, and I come from a mill, and I also know that it's such a pity that all the small scale mills that used to be there no longer operate because they're not as efficient enough. But I have the impression that also with mills, I mean, sadly, not in your area so far, maybe that can change, but that there's also similar to the little movement of new style bakeries, and there's also some bakeries that have a little mill placed inside their rooms, or even farmers adding a mill to their places. Then still you have the issue of cleaning all the grains and so on. But I see that Laurent from E5 Bakehouse, the head miller, is here. Do you want to add your impression, like how easy is it to set up a mill as a baker or as a farmer? A little one.
Hi. First of all, thanks everyone. and Kimberley for your presentation, and also Lucas. I could add, we have a mill at E5 Bakehouse. We're in the middle of London. So basically what we could do is like just build a small mill there with a 1 meter diameter stone. We have like 5 tons of storage on site. So at the moment we are milling, I would say, like half of the flour we use. So we still have to buy some flour because we're just limited by space. In London, space is really expensive. So that's kind of the issue we have to deal with. We started growing our own wheat on our own farm. So we tried to make everything in-house, and on the way from the farm, there is the cleaning facility that brings it to us. The problem is still the transport, because like, as you said, lorries have to come like every 4 weeks to our bakery because storage is limited. But it's a nice asset to a bakery, because like people come to see the mill. Actually, they're approaching me all the time and I explain it to them, which is really nice. So they especially come for them. Now we are looking into selling the flour locally to restaurants and all this stuff as well, because we can produce more than we use at the moment. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. And I'm also following a lot of like farmers in the UK. A lot of them are getting their own mills on the farm. What I'm not sure about that. I haven't seen it in action, but like this new American stone mill is a tiny, small mill. A lot of our farmers in the UK get them at the moment. It's an investment, of course, but then you can do everything locally, which is, I think, really nice. So I think it's something we should think about, especially as Lucas mentioned, transporting the grains there and getting it back as flour is kind of not the way it should be, in my opinion, and there are ways to fix it, I think. Yeah, but if you guys want any information or whatever, just drop me an email. I'm really happy to help you out with the experience, or you come to London if you're ever around, just come by and say hello. Happy to give you a tour of our bakery. Okay.
Great, thanks for this short impression. We could have an own talk about mills, but let's not for the moment. Katrin and Ronja have another question.
Hello. First, yeah, thank you, Lucas, for your input. And I have some questions for the agriculture. Like, what is the specific sort of perennial wheat you grow, and how do you harvest it?
Well, I'm harvested with a normal harvesting machine, so it's a normal harvester, and the breed it's wheat with I forgot the English name, with Quecke. Does somebody know the name in English?
Yeah, I know Quecke.
Well, that's actually not for harvesting Quecke, so you don't actually, usually you don't want to have this on your fields, but
yeah.
Well, the mixture of it with wheat makes it perennial.
Okay. And the mixed crops, how do you harvest them? Because are they all at the same time ripe?
Yeah, so that's always not that easy to handle this, that they are really at the same time ready for harvesting. But yeah, you have to know which things you grow together. So like which always work is like peas, so winter peas, peas with wheat or with spelt. But also like I showed on the picture this oat together with fava beans that usually works. This year it's maybe not that easy because the fava beans are or some of the fava beans are still green and not ready for harvest, but the oats are all ready. So yeah, that can be not that easy. But usually when you know which crop you have to put together, and it can work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then Kimberley has a question.
Hi, Lucas. Thanks for that. It looks really inspiring. All the work they're doing is a lot. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. One is with the mixed crop, where you said you had 15 species, and then later you said it would be nice to find a way of selling it all together. Did I understand that correctly? Is that what you meant, that you would like to find a use for mixtures going straight into the food system?
Yes, that would be nice, but I already know that it's impossible, because you always well, when you have a mixture, it's not always the same mixture. It's pretty different from year to year. So in some year you only have oat, in the other year you only have fava beans, for example, and less oat. So you can't just give it to a bakery or to a miller, and that won't work. So you have to separate it, and the miller or our miller is not able or is not willing to separate it. So the common millers only want wheat, or only want fava beans, or only want rye, but not a mixture out of 2 or 3 or 5 different grains. So yeah, that's an issue. But yeah, we already bought this year a machine which can separate it, or the most of it. For better separating, you would need what's it called? Like in camera, which detects the different seeds and put it in different holes. So and that's a machine. Yeah, the most farmers wouldn't afford it, because it's just too expensive.
Were you imagining that there could be inclusions of the flowers as well in the crop? Like you said, there was quite a lot of flowers in the mixture. I'm asking because there seems to be a bit of a new fashion in the UK for botanical blends of flower. The idea being that potentially having a multi-species flower, and flower as in that you would bake with, could be good for your microbiome. And I wondered if that's where you were coming from. This is the second time I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, we are not harvesting the flower seeds or the flowers at all. They are going through the harvester and back on the field. So, but it could be an option to harvest the flowers when they are flowering. Yeah, maybe then you would have to pick them by hand. But in this system, they are the main purpose of the flowers are to attract insects, and to don't have those insects lead to disease for the fava beans. So you want to attract those insects like beans or pollinators you need for the fava beans. So that's the main purpose of the flowers for now for us. Yeah.
Thank you. My second question was about the oats that you grow. Do they have hulls on them? And do you have any difficulty processing the oats? Because it's a big problem in the UK. We only have one major oat processing plant. So it would be impossible if you were my neighbor farmer and I wanted to receive your oats in my bakery. It would be impossible because they all get mixed together with everybody else's organic oats in the country. And I wondered if you had any insights into where your oats go or how they get processed.
Well, we have to grow. We sometimes have it with a hull, and then we can't sell it to our bakery or to the local mill. The local mill that is 150 kilometers away. We have I don't know how many, but there are a few mills that can handle the hull and put it away. But our local mill for them, we only grow naked oat, it's called, so which does not have it. And yeah, then but some of the oats also have the hulls, so you still have to separate them, and for this you again need something to separate it, and that's usually also a camera which they detect the one with the hole and the one without it. So yeah, it's pretty difficult.
Thank you.
Oats is actually a great cue, which leads us to the final speaker of tonight, Miriam. Would you like to talk a little bit about Kornwerk and your particular approach? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the segue was because we were just talking about oats, I imagine. And yeah, as Kornwerk, we're a project here in Berlin. We've been around for, I guess, a year and a half now, where we try to make products from old varieties of grains. And in this case, we've begun with oats. Really, these are heirloom varieties. So we don't have actually the problem that Kimberley mentioned before when she's talking about we use heirloom varieties, and then you might have problems with the farmers because they might fall over these tall varieties and so on. We really can take them, basically, we cooperate with an organization that recultivates old varieties of plants, of vegetables mostly, but also some grains. And we can do that because we've made an unusual product, which is not something baked, and it's not something very traditional for agriculture, but I'll show you what it is on a slide. I have to share my screen. And as you can see, it is, I guess, a very modern product in that sense. It is an oat drink. And so it is an oat drink, which I guess has become very popular now among, especially in cities, but I guess in general. And it is, as you can see, we've tried to do it as, I guess, as sustainably as possible. It is regional, so the varieties of oats that grow, they come from Brandenburg around Berlin. It is also from organic farming. It is in a glass bottle, as you can see. And it is also only pasteurized at very low temperatures, so it has to be cooled in the refrigerator. When people, and it's also here, and you can see, I mean, the German speakers, I guess, will read that, this aspect about solidarity, community-supported agriculture, I'll talk about later. But it's actually been hard. I mean, we see the heart of what we do based around this using of the old varieties to create our products. And that's actually something that's been very difficult to communicate, because people usually see, great, this comes in a glass bottle. Great, it's regional, but it's really hard to get people to understand what we do. I mean, in a setting like this, or when you have time to speak to people, yes. But because we sell these, so it's totally different than, like, say, the experience of Kimberley, who's there to talk to the people of the things she's making. We sell them, you know, in organic supermarkets that are in Berlin. It's hard for people to communicate what we're doing. And I guess that's actually the only slide that I have. So maybe I'll stop and I'll continue speaking just like that. But to make all of that possible, we, like as I said before, we work together with, we cooperate with this organization that has provided, or has basically taken these old varieties out of the seed bank, out of the gene bank, and has a network of farmers who are growing them. And we've worked with them, and basically we started out with the two varieties that somebody was growing the year that we decided to start, and we were just going to see what happens, what they taste like, how do they actually in terms of taste and consistency in what we wanted to make. And we were quite lucky with the fact that these are, because they've just been taken out of the gene bank and nobody has really described them. Actually, the work right now that we want to do in cooperation with them is to go through that, to see, okay, what kind of varieties do they have, or what kind of qualities do they have that they offer for farmers? What kind of qualities do they offer for us, who process them into other things. And this is just something that we're starting to work with. Our idea is also to work with as many varieties as possible. So here I have a bottle of, this is actually mixed with chocolate, and then people can see a variety, it's actually on this side, a variety of oats they're using. But our idea is actually to switch them around and not to always use the same one, because we would think that it would be sort of besides the point to always have using the same variety and then to say, okay, this is the variety that tastes like that. I mean, our idea is really to communicate to customers, okay, well, if this, you tasted this last year and now we're using, or this is a different charge and we're using a different variety now, then you have to accept that part of this variety is a difference in taste, might be a slight difference in nutritional quality and things like that. Actually, now that you were just talking about the importance of mills a little while ago, I realized that we're also very lucky that our regional mill here in Brandenburg was able to work with hulled oats, because if it wasn't, then we would have really been in a problem. It was very hard actually to find a mill that would work with the small amounts of quality that are of grains that we're harvesting for what we do. Because we do it on a fairly small scale, only around Berlin and the region. And regarding the community supported agriculture, I mean, I guess it's a funny term to use in our context, but this is sort of our vision that we try to bring forward. The oats right now are being grown by farmers around Berlin for whom we wanted to do some kind of community supported agriculture, but we as processors of the grain. And this is something, the main thing I want to say about that is, I mean, we're doing that now, but I think it's something that we really need to do with a lot of other people for it to be real. But the way it works right now is that we try to pay the farmers a fixed price per hectare, which is something I was reminded exactly of the same thing as Kimberley was talking around, like the price that she pays in the end for the wheat that you're using. Those are similar prices. I mean, we try to pay prices that are above the market price. We try to pay not only at the end of the harvest, but throughout the growing season. Because we are, a small, I mean, totally also that takes on a lot of risk because we're doing that alone. We've actually agreed that we'll pay, say, a maximum amount, like say if there was no harvest at all, then we would still only pay a maximum amount and then try to work together with a farmer in order so that they could get maybe state subsidies for the crop that they might have lost and so on. But this is something that has really created a strong link between what we do and the farmers that grow it, which I think is unusual, and it's unusually nice to also, like Kimberley said, to go to the field and to say, okay, this is the variety of oats that we're growing, to talk about it, to be able to take people there and to try to make this connection, which is usually not the case. But in order to really make a difference, both I think in terms of what we're trying to do with the biodiversity aspect of using old varieties, and also in terms of the way we're working with the farmers, this is something that we would really like to be more part of a network than do it alone. And it's challenging, as I said, because it's hard to communicate really that's at the heart of what we're doing. And it's hard to get people to accept it. And I'm really happy that there's this network here of people who are, involved in similar things, because I think that's exactly what we need to do to start having conversations like that, in order so that we're not doing it alone. And basically that's it. That's our story.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Another one of those inspiring stories where I always get a bit envious of people like the three of you who've been talking about what you're doing, because you're so hands-on with, you're really producing something, and and you have it in your daily work to change something, to work by your philosophy, so to speak. I love that. Any questions for Miriam? Katrin und Ronja.
Yeah, it's probably just a quick one. I was wondering why you decided to pasteurize it at a low temperature. Is that to do with the nutritional value, or does it actually also influence the taste?
Yeah, it's because of the nutritional value. If we pasteurize it at high temperatures, then it would be it would keep for longer, but because of but then it would be completely, I guess, dead, you could say. Yeah, it's because of the nutritional value. Yeah.
And a quick another question: where do you get the chocolate from?
Yeah, this was when we decided to do this chocolate thing. It was difficult because obviously that can't be completely regional. Two of us, actually myself and another woman we're actually three of us who have this project. We're both from Mexico, and we actually made this thing. We wanted to taste a little bit Mexican, and we tried to find, because Mexico, yeah, chocolate is, I guess, from Mexico. So we tried to, it has actually cinnamon, which is also very the way you eat chocolate in Mexico, this combination of cinnamon chocolate. And we tried to find where we could get sort of a fair trade chocolate and so on, and that's how we made it. But obviously this does not come from Brandenburg.
Okay, thank you.
And Kimberley?
Hi, Miriam. I was just really, my imagination was really caught by the idea of different varieties of oats, because, well, in England, as I explained, we have a huge problem with processing, which means everybody grows the same varieties. And really, I've never tasted like different oats side by side. I wondered if you might explain what you've experienced or what you found with some of the flavor in some of the different varieties that you've been working with.
Yeah, we haven't, because we made something so unusual. It's been actually really interesting. The first variety that we use, which is called a variety called Heidegold, we realized it had a very creamy texture. So our hypothesis, which has turned out to in the test that we're making, we'll have to see with the research, because it's something that's hard to do. It has, I guess, the variety of starch, or the type of starch, makes it very a very creamy drink, which is very nice. I mean, like, we just got lucky with that. But then we've used other varieties. So far, we've used two of the ones of the, probably there must be like 7 or 8 that this organization works with. But we depend on, you know, what is being grown around here, what the farmer has decided to grow, and so on. And in that case, yeah, we've noticed that with the making of the product, it has a different taste, it has a different consistency. And actually, pretty soon we are thinking, actually it's something new that the mill has offered, that we could also make flakes out of the oats that we have, because we noticed that around Berlin there doesn't seem to be someone offering a local flaked oats, or what do you call that in English? Not flaked oats, but anyway, I think I have like it. And we'll see. I mean, we haven't actually tasted them as flakes before, but we'll see that. But we definitely see that the different varieties behave differently for the drink that we're making. Yeah.
The issue of flakes, I once spoke to our head miller about it, and we are also delivering oats, flaked oats or rolled oats to a company that produces an oats drink from it, and they loved our variety, our product, because they said due to the flaking or the rolling process, the oats has already been opened up, as they say, aufgeschlossen, and so they get creamier by this, through this process. So it might be a certain part due to the variety that you're using, and then also due to the kind of pre-processing that you do before you grind it into a flour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true.
And your partners, you said you were thinking a lot about also what they need, and you pay them throughout the farming process. Is that, do you work with several farmers? Do they want different things from you, or is it, can you say, okay, a farmer in general needs this and this, and now you've figured out a way to cooperate best with them? Or do they have individual needs based on, I don't know, different farming structures?
We found that we started working, right now, most of our oats have come from one particular farmer that we started doing this with. And I think sort of the word spread, and we've been contacted by more saying, we heard that you, I mean, first, they're curious also why we want the old varieties in the first place. But then they're interested in hearing about it, and they say, okay, so these qualities are interesting for you as somebody who's processing them as well. And so far, I think that it hasn't been so many. I mean, it's been two mainly that we've worked with. I mean, one that we started doing that, and then this year, because actually, and that has been a challenge actually more often than we thought it would be with climate change. Growing oats around Brandenburg has not been easy. This year the crop was almost lost too, and we also needed to buy extra from someone else. So because I think as we grow, we'll have the situation where we're working with more what kinds of needs do different farmers have. But as I said before, actually the best situation would be that it wasn't just us doing that processing, that talk together with a farmer like that, but it would be several people who are doing processing of grains around here who would maybe think of doing a system like that together. And then we could really have sort of an impact like that, because otherwise I think both with using the old varieties and working like with farmers, it's only very little that we can do for the amount of things that we produce.
I have a question, if I may. Sorry, I just jumped in, and so maybe you already answered to this. But I'm a farmer, and I'm very interested in all varieties. Where did you find the varieties, and do you have some like who do they belongs to?
Mm-hmm. The varieties that we use in conjunction, because we actually became a member of the in Germany they're called Fern e.V. I guess that's relevant for the people who might be from this area. And they're basically, I guess,
can you say again?
Fern e.V. Maybe I can also write it in the chat.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And as far as I know, these are varieties that this association basically got from I imagine the old gene banks or seed banks where they took them out, and they still had these old varieties. So they are not variety. I mean, in contrast to modern bred varieties, which might have a patents breeder's right certificate or something like that on them, these do not. Yeah. I don't know if that was the direction of what you said. Who owns them? I mean, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, that's exactly the meaning, because if they are not on the list of the certified varieties, then you cannot grow them.
Yeah, well, you can. I think you can grow them in small amounts, and you can grow them I think the question is, if you wanted to commercialize them as seeds, then you would have to have them on a special catalog for conservation varieties. Is the way you would market them as seeds, but we're not marketing seeds for that, so we're not dealing with that problem.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Do you grow any grains? Can you talk about your own farm? Anne-Marie, I mean, you're probably not.
Me? Okay, yeah. Sorry. We got here. We live on Fehmarn, in Schleswig-Holstein, and since 5 years we live here, and since 3 we got the farm from the parents of Anne-Marie, which is my wife, and she was listening before, and I'm now came in, and yes, I just use. I'm working conventional, as I got the farm from my father-in-law, but we are thinking very much to change the things. We already changed. We started with the cover crop this year, and we really would like to go on regenerative agriculture and so on. And yeah, the idea of like I follow much the work of Cocopelli and Vandana Shiva, and the idea of like this not grain which are not allowed. It's playing. It's very interesting to hear that it's possible to grow them for commercialization, not of seeds. Like it's also not my intention, and yeah, it's very interesting. But we grow only conventional cereal.
Thank you. Any more questions in the room?
I have another question, yes, for Kimberley, maybe. What are, like, I don't remember exactly in terms of geography, like if it's far or close to like a city center. I don't really know like so much like the geography. Maybe you talk about it, but I don't remember specifically. But what are your like type of also like clients? Because you were also talking about like diversity and all that. And so I'm wondering, like, also in terms of clients, is it something that through this like narrative, like, yeah, like all the beautiful things you do, like that then specific products are bought by specific, let's say, public or customers, or how is it in that sense? I guess it also depends a lot to the geography. That's why I'm asking.
Well, we're close to a city, and actually the bakery is in a centre for arts, so visual arts centre. It's a very good question, and it's quite a complicated one to answer, I think, because there's a lot of discussion in our community around the ethics, if you like, of creating new food systems and who are we creating them for. And we're in and because we're on the edge of a city centre, we're in a residential area that covers a diversity of people and demographic. So immediately to one side, we have a very impoverished community. It's been for many, many years underdeveloped part of the city that's been left to degrade. Then we also have right near to us a very vibrant third generation migrant community from the Caribbean, migrants who came in the 60s. And then on the other side, we have one of the most expensive housing estates in the city, like right there. So within walking distance, we also have a university campus. So we have students and a lot of city centre high-rise flats, which is sort of young.
Super diverse, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, there's an interesting question is who are your customers and why do they come? And really, it's not necessarily connected to the geography of where we are, but more, I think this is common in cities, it's a bit more tribal. So we probably appeal to a community of people who are not necessarily very local, but they buy into or they connect with us because of our values. So we have customers who come from all over the city, different suburbs of the city, because they can't buy the sorts of products that we make anywhere else. It's often levied as a criticism at us that we don't, we're making a food system that is out of place, but I think that's a very difficult argument to make when you're in a city and there are so many different communities around.
Yeah, no, totally. A
few projects at the moment to try to examine that, and our Approachable Loaf project, which Jona mentioned earlier, was a challenge thrown down from Steve Jones at the Bread Lab, where he basically said, come on, you artisan bakers, you're making all these beautiful things, but really, who are you making them for? And are you excluding people in your style? And he asked us all to really examine the bread systems that we have and look at whether or not we are reaching the right people or enough people, probably.
I mean, what is the right people is also difficult, like to put a right or wrong, but I'm just asking because I think it's such an important also like topic, and I don't have the answer neither, you know, of like we speak a lot about like new food cultures, and then it's like, how do we navigate between this, like in this complexity of making good food that like is value, like has a higher value. So it's normal that it is also more expensive, because if you want to let's say reward everyone in the food chain, it has to be more expensive. But then how to not leave on the side like this nutritious food and like more healthy actually food, not leave on the side actually people that maybe actually need it the most. And I still don't really have an answer, like, or like a good answer to that. So maybe it was something that we could discuss along the 4 days, because I'm also, when I analyze like Berlin, for example, I'm in Berlin, it's like the most of the, so the not most, it's not true because I don't know so many, but some of the bakeries where I'm going, where the quality is absolutely beautiful and taste and everything, it's always kind of the same type of clients. And I'm just asking, how could we actually make it more like also let's say inclusive? Can we or not? Or I mean, I don't really know. So I was asking myself, like, or asking you or other people in the talk actually, and if anyone has something to say about that, would be nice.
For me, when I started the bakery, it was really important for me to have a filter for that, because it was a big issue that was overwhelming. And I try to always remind myself that I started a bakery to feed myself, to feed my family, and to feed my community, and that it's my responsibility to do that without damaging other people's opportunities to do the same for themselves, their families, and their community. And that's the approach that I take to the farming and the things that we interact with. But I do believe that it's possible for others in the city who represent different communities and different families of people to do what we're doing, as long as we allow them. And I'm very much an advocate of, I'd like to see many small bakeries in our city run by a diversity of people. And I absolutely believe strongly that I should not grow my own business, and that if I have energy to add to it, it's very much to encourage other people to do the same thing that we have done, but to represent different styles of product and apply some of the values, but really look at completely different ways of making food, if that's what's appropriate to them.
Can I just jump in real quick, because I know that there's another baker here who can only be here for one day, and I'm looking at you. And I was wondering if Aunt, maybe you also have like experiences with that in your bakery. You know, I mean, you probably have to discuss prices also with your customers. And what's your take on that? Do you have maybe, I don't know, an opinion or experiences on that matter?
Sorry, about the prices?
Yeah, about prices, and also making it more accessible for everyone. For example, I know that Florian Domberger, where we're going to on Saturday, he is putting he has mobile smaller bakeries that he's putting into shipment containers. Kimberley, you can't be there, so I'm just explaining it to you real quick. And he is putting them into, how he's calling it, like bread deserts, so where there's no good bread, so outside of the city, not into like the city centers where there's already good bread available. Or I know, for example, another bakery, Albatros, they're just having like a neighborhood kind of like bench in the backyard where they make like half the price just for neighbors. And so there's like different ways of, I don't know, making it accessible to other people. And so maybe things like this. And is there any?
Sorry, the price what we for our bread, or the price for the grain? You mean what? I can't understand it totally. We're talking about the price of the bread.
Yes.
For example, that's more or less a low price, I would say, because we are here on a village, and I only need so much money that the houses are in a good shape, that the roof is okay, that no rain comes into our house. It's not so necessary here to get a lot of money. Also, the grain, for example, we buy the complete harvest from our farmer, and that is for us a good price. I don't know the price really, because the farmer gives us an invoice and we pay it. And if you ask me how expensive the stout is or something else, I have no idea. I gave him the money what he needs, and it works totally easy, in our area here. And if we have bread left, there are some people coming and they get the bread and they bring me some vegetables. We change the left bread. Yeah. It runs in this way, I would say, since 350 years here. And I would be happy that it could go on for the next 350 years. I tried to work in the way they worked years ago. Very easy. Not many thoughts inside. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Are there any last questions? Sorry, Anna, did you want to?
No, I wanted to ask the same thing, because we're already a bit behind time. Maybe if we take the full academic quarter hour, one more last question we could take if something is popping up in someone's head.
It's dinner time now.
Yeah, but well, thank you all so much. First of all, to the
one more. Sorry.
A question?
One more question to
okay.
And Kimberley, I wanted to say again, it was really encouraging your speak and what you told us. Thank you for that. And about the population wheat, how what are your experiences working with it? Like, do you have to change every year a bit the amount and the recipe? Because isn't it that then like it changes every year again, like the varieties in the grain? Or maybe maybe you can say something.
When I first started working with it, I assumed that that would be the case. But actually, I don't think we have to change it much. Each year when the harvest comes in, depending on the weather and the small details about the way that the grain has ended up, we do have to adjust our formulas. And every time a new harvest comes in from the local grain, we generally change, make small changes in fermentation temperatures, mix times and hydration. But I would say that actually I always recognize the grain. It's not hugely different each time. I can recognize it. I think what happens over many years is if it's grown in different locations, I'm starting to see in different farms now that there are differences in the population from one farm to another. But I'm not sure that I've been working with it for enough years to be able to give you any more information than that, I'm afraid. But all I would say is it's nothing to be afraid of, and it doesn't change too much.
Thank you. And do you use other grains or just population wheat?
We use, we bake with rye a little bit and some barley, but in wheats we have two populations, both with majority modern wheat breeding kind of input. And then also we've been baking with a couple of heritage landrace varieties, one from Sweden, Öland, and also we have this year had quite an interesting mixture of English heritage wheat varieties. There's 7 different varieties mixed together and grown as a field mixture. So I'm really interested to see how that comes this year and whether it's much different, but I've really enjoyed working with that. It's all new. It's exciting. It's just nice to try new things.
Thank you.
And Arndt, you wanted to say something to that question as well?
No, sorry, I would go a step back to the discussion of the price. I only would like to say, often if I'm in cities and I see in the local small upcoming bakeries the price of the kilogram of bread, I often think it's too expensive. It is, for me, it's not okay if there is a bread, the kilo is more than maybe €6. Here in Germany, sometimes 7 or 8 euros a kilogram of bread. I wonder why. Also in cities where they have maybe a higher price for the shopper to pay, but that is too high. That's not often. You have to compare bakeries which have a mixed assortment, which make sweet stuff and bread and so on and so on. Then maybe you need a higher price for the bread. But often you can find bakeries with maybe 5 different kinds of breads and nothing more else. And they should, I think I'm sure that the baker gets more money than the farmer in this case. And that's not okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement. I think we've all seen that there's a lot of interesting aspects to the whole grain world. And I absolutely am with you, Kimberley, not calling it a value chain. That's just in my head, but it's a network or a system, because everything is interlinked with everything, and it's not a straight line from A to B. And at each step, or in the system, in the network, we have different challenges, but also some of those are better addressed in cooperation and together. And I think all 3 of you speakers have provided very inspiring examples of these ideas, and from your very different perspectives. And I'd love to conclude to go on with this discussion, not today, but some other time. And we will definitely try to do our part in this as Korn Labor. But first of all, I'm very looking forward to the next 3 days in our Korn Symposium program. Frida, do you want to conclude the session?
No, you did that very well. Thank you, Jonna. I just want to say thank you to the speakers to take the time, and I'm very looking forward to spend the next 3 grain days with you all. We will see each other on Saturday at 12:30. And yes, there's the chance to continue these conversations, continue these discussions, and really go deeper on Sunday. And I think also on Saturday, we will also see Katrin and Ronja, who also asked a lot of questions today, which I'm very happy about. Thank you, guys. So yes, very much looking forward to see you again. If there's any other question regarding, I don't know, transportation, meeting points, feel free to shoot us an email or write us in Slack. And otherwise, I wish you a nice evening, and I see you all on Saturday. And maybe give a little reaction to the speakers. You can send little party hats. Thank you all, and I see you Saturday. Schön, dass du noch da warst, Arndt.
Thank you. Bye.